I'm Ellen Langer, and this is Win the Day with James Whittaker.
You're listening to Win the Day with James Whittaker.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
Broadcasting from Los Angeles, California. Here's your host, James Whittaker.
Let's go!
Hey winners, welcome back to Win the Day. The quote for this episode comes from Marcel Proust and says, "The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes." Today we're joined by Harvard psychologist Dr. Ellen Langer, known as the mother of mindfulness and the mother of positive psychology. Dr. Langer is the author of more than 200 research articles on human behavior and its consequences. She has studied people in businesses, schools, and nursing homes, as well as other everyday scenarios to revolutionize the understanding of psychology, health, and human performance. In our first episode together, that was episode 178, Dr. Langer established the framework of mind-body unity, showing that our physical health is a direct reflection of our mental expectations and the labels we choose to accept. Today, we're moving from theory to high-stakes application, tackling everything from chronic pain and traumatic labels to the crushing anxiety and overwhelm that so many people are facing in this modern world. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to use symptom variability to manage chronic pain, practical tools to dismantle anxiety and unrelenting stress once and for all, proven methods for mindful parenting and avoiding burnout, and how the power of possibility can fundamentally shift your physiology. Before we begin, the right bit of inspiration can completely change the trajectory of someone's life. So there's a friend or loved one out there who needs to hear this episode or could use some help to win the day. Share it with them right now. All right, let's win the day with Harvard psychologist Dr. Ellen Langer. Ellen, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming back on the show.
No, my pleasure. It's always good to be with you, James.
We had so much fun last time. Well, to kick things off, since the mindful body has reached a massive global audience, I've seen it everywhere, what is the single most common resistance or misunderstanding that you've encountered from people trying to apply mind-body unity to chronic illness?
Oh, gee, that's a good question. I don't tune into the negative stuff. So I don't know. That I get a lot of fan mail, and I think the people who are resistant are also resistant to writing emails. So I'm sure it's out there. And you can't blame people. I mean, the most exciting thing for me, James, is that the medical world seems to be coming around. So when I started all of this work decades ago, that was a time the medical model was such that it believed the only way you were going to get sick was the introduction of an antigen. All right, what you thought, felt was irrelevant. And I'm sure they wanted everyone to be happy, but still, you weren't going to get sick because of your thoughts. So at that time, there were many people. You could have called almost any physician and they would have said, Langer, she's crazy, whatever. Now I've been invited to give talks at the leading medical schools all over the world. I get surprising emails from physicians of all shades, oncologists, surgeons, and so on. So it's very rewarding for me. Now, but still, those that are not writing, I don't know if they're friends or foes.
Is there a type from the traditional medical world, like a field of interest that you're just really excited about at the moment or interested in?
No, all of it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Whatever I'm thinking, anybody brings to me, I tend to get excited about. So I'm not very discriminating. Because I'm also doing a lot of work now in education. And I have a children's book that I just put out there. It's called Finding Happy. So I'm excited about that. But my basic interest still is in the mindful body and basically showing people that they have more control over their health and well-being, over even chronic illnesses than most people think.
Well, speaking of the mindful body, for someone who's living with chronic pain, how do they transition from noticing pain to noticing the absence of pain without feeling like they're simply lying to themselves?
Well, I use this technique. This is attention to symptom variability, which was my response to how do you get people to take a placebo? Because you can't take a placebo, which is effective because you think it's going to work. If it's just a sugar pill, it's a sugar pill, so it's likely not to work. So I came up with this, which is far afield. The major relationship is that it does give people control. So it starts with lots of very big research, I believe, important research that we've done on major illnesses. And before I tell you what it is, it's already worked with Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, chronic pain, even women and pregnancies. The most recent, we just went over the data yesterday, was my graduate student Peter Ungle finished the study where we can increase the speed or decrease the amount it takes to recover from cataract surgery. So its implications are vast. And so what we do in each of these studies is we call people. This is the way it starts. Eventually, you'll be able to, you just use your smartphone to ring, and then you ask yourself the questions that'll follow. So we say, how is the pain, whatever the symptom now? Is it better or worse than the last time? And why? Now, several things happen with this. The first is that, most people who are dealing with chronic anything believe there's nothing they can do about it. Here, you're doing something, so that feels good. Second, as soon as you notice that, right now it was a little better, or even if you notice it was a little worse, you're seeing that it changes. It's not always maximally awful. So that feels good. Third, that when you answer the question, why is it a little better now than it was before? Was it that you just laid down, you just had a glass of wine, you got off the phone with somebody you love, whatever it is. Now, the search for why is mindful. And we have all these studies over decades showing that itself is good for your health. As you actively search, actively notice new things, the neurons are firing, and it's literally and figuratively enlivening. And then finally, I believe, without data, that you're more likely to find a solution if you're looking for one than if you're not. So we did this across a host of disorders, chronic pain, and so on. It seems to get rid of almost all of the symptoms. It's kind of remarkable. I mean, it doesn't even have to be a chronic illness. Let's say you chronically get on your wife's nerves because she thinks you're so what? Give me what would she think you are? You're so sloppy. Okay, you're clearly immaculate. So we'll use that so it won't hit home.
She hasn't used the word sloppy. She's used plenty of other
Okay,
ones.
well,
Annoying. Annoying is a big one she uses.
Okay, so she sees you as annoying, and she sees you as always annoying. So you're this close to her leaving you. Well, if I called her periodically, or she set her smartphone to ring and said, how annoying is he now? Is he more or less annoying than the last time? She'd say, yeah, right now he wasn't even annoying. He was actually helpful. So the larger point is that everything is always changing. Everything looks different from different perspectives. And we tend to ignore, to be oblivious to all that change. Once you become mindless, once you think you know how to do something or you learn a fact, if you knew, for instance, what I was going to say next, you wouldn't listen. All right. So this mindlessness holds the world still when in fact it's changing. And people overwhelmingly seem to confuse the stability of their mindsets with the stability of the underlying phenomena. Now, what's interesting, people are so afraid of uncertainty that they want to act as if they know. You cannot know. They want this so they can control. We want this so we can control our lives. But by doing this, by freezing things that are actually moving, we actually reduce the control we have over the world. And, let me say this. I know you want to speak too. It's your show. But just give me another second. So everybody's afraid of uncertainty. What they're really afraid of is looking stupid. That's why everybody pretends they know. And, we make a personal attribution for uncertainty. I don't know, but you may know, therefore I'll pretend, avoid you, or whatever. The alternative to that is a universal attribution for uncertainty. I don't know. Nobody knows. And when you know nobody knows, not knowing then has a different flavor. In fact, for success, the posture one should assume is to be confident but uncertain. And the other reason that we want to know is because we're so afraid of outcomes, that this thing is going to hit me in the head, so I have to be aware of all the good things, bad things, good people, bad people, and so on. So we add to this a universal attribution for uncertainty. Nobody knows that whatever we experience is in our heads. It's not in external events. External events don't do anything. All right. So if you see something as good and freeze it, or it's as mindless as if you see it as bad and freeze it. Things are not good or bad. So that means that I don't have to worry so much. So let's say this podcast goes horribly and I reveal something I didn't mean to reveal. My dog starts biting. Who knows? My dog bites me and all of a sudden, and heroic Ellen becomes, how dare,
Might be good
how
viewing.
good
The
could
audience
be?
might love it.
Right. Well, yeah, but how good could she be if her dog doesn't like her? But okay, so something happens. So that would seem terrible. However, it seeming terrible doesn't make it terrible. There are actually many advantages if that actually happened.
Yeah.
Not the dog biting me so much, but that if this were awful, then maybe I would stop doing so many podcasts, and give everybody listening a break, that I got something. The podcasts reach different people. So I often tend to say the same thing. Somebody wrote me on Facebook or however they got to me and said, "You're wonderful. I love everything. But can you say something new?" Gee, I have a lot to say, but if people ask me the same questions, I'm probably going to give the same answers.
Exactly. I think that's on the interviewer. Yeah.
James, so if this were terrible, so I wouldn't do it for a while. Then I'd forget all those answers and I'd be fresh, when I took up the activity. I don't know. I'm just...
Well, anxiety is a hot topic these days. So how does all the stuff that you're talking about now tie into anxiety?
First of all, if you think you're always anxious, nobody is always anything. So do the attention to symptom variability. This time the symptom would be anxiety. The other is to recognize events don't cause stress. Events don't make us anxious. What makes us anxious or stressed are our views of events. So the more mindful you are, the more views of the event you have available to yourself. Rather than think, oh my God, this terrible thing's going to happen. I was explaining this on a podcast the other day, and I said, okay, so let's say my internet goes out. All right, so I'll go have lunch. Well, the reason I remember this so clearly is because then my internet went out. And I'd like to say that I don't just talk the talk. I went in, I had lunch. And a one-liner that lots of people, friends of mine, tell me they put it on their refrigerator, which is, next time you're stressed, you're anxious, ask yourself, is it a tragedy or an inconvenience? It's almost never a tragedy. So you banged the car, you missed an appointment, your internet went out, really. Then there are several things people can do. One of them is to think about the last 3 times you were stressed. Did the event even happen? Probably not. And so what happens is we worry about something, give ourselves over to it, and it doesn't happen. That's a waste of one's life, of those moments. And, we don't need to prepare ourselves. The people I'm speaking to now on your podcast are all adults, that they know how to deal with things when the time comes. So just, in some sense, no stress before it's time. I think that a very simple thing, stress requires 2 things. I know you're looking at me. When is she going to finish so you can talk? And right after this. Stress requires 2 things. It requires a belief that something is going to happen, and when it happens, it's going to be awful. Well, it turns out that prediction is an illusion. We can predict for a group, but not the individual case. And I'll give an example of that in a moment if you're interested. You're stressed about something, anxious about it. Give yourself 3 reasons why it might not happen. Similar things in the past and it didn't happen. James wasn't always annoying, your wife can be saying to herself, and so on. So first you started thinking this thing was going to happen. Now you have reasons why you've generated them. So to you, they're reasonable, why it might not happen. So you're already better. But let's assume it does happen. This is the harder part, but the more important as far as I'm concerned. Now ask yourself, how is that actually a good thing? As soon as this thing you dread reveal the other side of it, there's nothing to worry about. If you and I, you ask me to go someplace, if we're going, that's great. You call me and you say we can't go, that's great. I'll do something. You just become easy. Lots of people grow into more of this. We tend to call it wisdom as you get older. But I teach my Harvard undergraduates, why wait? We can all be doing this right away. Yeah. So the most important part of it is to recognize you don't have to feel whatever you're feeling. Feelings are choices. Why choose to be depressed, anxious, miserable?
Would your approach change for someone who's right in the middle of, say, a panic attack and they're not really open to as many of those things? Is that when you would just go straight into something like breathing, or would you have a bit of a different approach?
Yeah, well, it depends. I mean, it's sort of, we can take care of most healing, but if you just, are in a car accident and your arm is all smashed, let the doctors do their thing, and then we'll deal with the pain.
Yeah.
So yeah, with a panic attack, it depends on how severe, whether we're talking about it just started or it's in the middle or it's, towards the end of it. But yeah, what led to the attack in the first place? What leads to the anxiety? And most anxiety is not as severe as a panic attack.
Can you explain mindful contagion and how that can improve the relationships with those around you?
Well, okay, it's wild. I mean, I'll give you the easy to accept. Because you asked me, your first question to me is, who's coming after you for all of your strange thoughts? And this one would bring a lot of people. But first, the simplest one is that when you're mindful, you're at peace, right? You're not stressed. You're sort of a single organized unit. Not your head is there, all that nonsense. Children, animals, and people find that comforting. That if you go to somebody who has a demeanor similar to your own, where you're smiling, you just give the impression of being a nice guy, you're less afraid of the person making you feel small, attacking you in some way. So the more mindful we are, the nicer we are, the easier it is for other people to approach us. But the piece that I wrote about in The Mindful Body, and with all sorts of conditions, I say, look, this is what we found. I can't fully explain it, but we shouldn't discount it just because it seems to go against our mundane understanding of physics. Interesting, physicists have less difficulty accepting it. Okay, so in one of these studies, we show people a simple index card. On the index card, it says, I'll say many different things, but this might say, I love Paris in the springtime. I give the index card to someone to read. They read, I love Paris in the springtime. I say, how many words were on that card? They go, I love Paris in the spring. 6. I say, I'll pay you to be accurate. I love Paris in the springtime, anyway, so people almost universally don't see the double word. Now, here's what's wild. Okay, so let's say you're mindful, and now your wife, who finds you annoying most of the time, is just standing next to you, and we give her the index card to read. The data suggests that she will see the double letter, that somehow your mindfulness, your presence, who knows how to explain it, will affect her. We're replicating this in a prison now, of all places. The main reason to be mindful is that for you personally, it's good for your health. You'll live longer. You'll be happier. You'll be able to solve problems more easily. And you appear trustworthy and nice to people. And that's probably the best reason for your relationship to improve. It's also that if you're mindful, if your wife were mindful, she would not only know you're not always annoying, she'd know, and this is a mouthful, behavior makes sense from the actor's perspective, or else the actor wouldn't do it. You don't wake up in the morning and say, today I'm going to be annoying. So what is it from your perspective you're actually doing when you're annoying?
Jokes. I come from Australia. Usually we're just making jokes a lot. Yeah.
Okay, so you're being funny. So now if she said you were being funny rather than you were annoying, would she want to change your behavior? Probably not. But if she did, the way to change your behavior is say, James, you better stop being so annoying. Since you're not intending to be annoying from your perspective, it'll fall on deaf ears. What she has to do is get you to no longer value being funny. Now, I side with her because you don't seem to me that you'd be particularly funny, but who knows? But it's true, that every negative behavior, every single one, has an equally strong but positive alternative. So for me, people may find me annoying. I don't know. The ones who don't come to me might find, and I'm not aware of it, and it's fine. But the things that I do have, one is that I can be called impulsive. The reason I'm impulsive is because I value being spontaneous. I'm also very gullible. Why am I gullible? Because I value being trusting. So it turns out that if you look at why you're doing whatever you're doing, you're no longer going to take yourself apart for doing it. And then you can make a decision. Well, do I want to change this to please my wife, my boss, whoever else, or just go elsewhere?
And
I'm
what
not seeking divorce.
Yeah. What if the next 50 days determine the next 50 years of your life? I've spent 10 years interviewing the world's top performers, Navy SEALs, Olympic gold medalists, billion-dollar founders, asking them a simple question. What's the one thing you do to win the day? Those answers are now yours in a free ebook called 50 Ways to Win the Day. 50 battle-tested actions from ordinary people who use them to become extraordinary. Are you next? Let's find out. Download your free copy at win-the.day/50ways or click the link in the show notes. What about negative thinking then? For people that just feel like they have negative thoughts that hold them back every single day, how would you approach that?
Well, it's the same thing. It's recognizing that everything that we're seeing can be understood in multiple ways. Now, we're brought up by our parents in schools to have absolutes. And so we look, and in schools, they ask you for single answers to questions. And if you know that single answer, then you think you know, and that's the end of it. And then you might even disparage somebody who doesn't know. If, on the other hand, you are asked for multiple answers to any question, that would probably keep you more mindful. So, for example, I didn't say this to you at our last podcast, but the one fact, or one of the facts everybody in the world thinks they know, is how much is 1 + 1. Mm-hmm. So if I were to ask you, I'll ask you, James, how much is 1 + 1?
2.
Yeah, but it's not always 2. Mm. If you're using a base 10 number system, 1 + 1 is 2. If you're using a base 2 number system, 1 + 1 is written as 10. Who cares? Most people don't even know there are different number systems. If you take one pile of laundry and you add one pile of laundry, 1 + 1 is 1. You take 1 wad of chewing gum, you add 1 wad of chewing gum, 1 + 1 is 1. You take one cloud and add one cloud. So in the real world, it doesn't equal 2 as or more often as it does. Now, just think about this, because before you just mindlessly said 2, now you have choice. When you're mindless, you're a robot. Are robots happy? No. Do robots have choices? No. Why be a robot when you don't have to? And the way not to is, again, to respect uncertainty. Okay, so now you can say 1, 2, or 10. Very different. So you pay attention to the context.
I was going to say, it gives people agency over their own lives as well, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, if you feel like I am a victim to all of these, a victim to anxiety, a victim to negative thoughts, a victim to other people.
So the negative thought is acting as if if your wife really thought you were annoying. I mean, it's a game that we play in relationships. Because if she wouldn't be with you, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure she's a woman who comes with many assets, personal, what have you. Why would she waste her time with you? So, and you understand this. So, she just didn't get the joke that you told her, or whatever personal things are going on. Okay, so the main thing is that people who engage in negative thinking are steeped in mindlessness. Mm-hmm. And what they need to do is question, something makes you anxious, question what makes you think this thing is going to happen? Why do I think that James is annoying? How else might I understand the person, the event? And life becomes more interesting again.
So interesting, because a lot of people that I work with and that I speak with and who listen and watch this podcast, they're part of a household where there's 2 working parents, they're raising kids. So something I'd love to chat to you about is this idea of mindful parenting. So could you maybe kick off with a definition of mindful parenting? And we'll
mindful parenting would be no different from mindful eating, mindful dog sitting, mindful walking. It's, are you there? Now, people are oblivious to the fact that almost everybody, almost all the time, is not there, sealed in an unlived life. Now, the problem is when you're not there, you don't know you're not there. So I have decades of research, study after study, in contexts, different ages, different cultures. Most of us are mindless most of the time. So the answer to almost any question, whether it's mindful parenting or anything else, is recognize you don't know. See, right now, so you're my child, James. If I mindlessly believe, pick up the fork, then I'm going to be harsh with you. If I realize that when you ate this particular thing with your hand, there was some good reason, it was probably fun, and there are places in this world where people, as a rule, eat with their hands. You just approach the child differently. All right, so this is a very big thing, and I'm actually writing a book right now about mindful parenting, which takes as the major understanding what I've already said for adults, which is behavior makes sense from the child's perspective, or else the child wouldn't do it. So let's say you're teaching, do you have children?
Yeah, 4-year-old
What?
and a 6-year-old.
Okay, how old? What's a 6-year-old's name?
So I've got Sophie as the 6-year-old and Henry as the 4-year-old.
So we don't want to make it complicated. You want me to learn 2 names?
We can say Sophie. Sophie the 6-year-old. Yeah.
Sophie the 6. I have a dog named Sophie, so it's going to be more confusing. But anyway, so let's say Sophie is crying wolf, metaphorically. And so you want to do what the allegory is supposed to teach you to do. You tell Sophie, you can't do that, Sophie, because when you really need somebody, they're not going to be there for you. Mindful parenting would say, why is Sophie doing this in the first place? Why she's doing it is because she's feeling unloved. At this particular moment, she needs attention. And as soon as you realize that, then you're not teaching her a lesson, you're giving her the love she needs. Even a thing like, why is Sophie you're trying to teach her the best way to be successful in life, Sophie, is you have to make eye contact. And you see she's always looking down. So what a parent today, most parents mindlessly would do is, Sophie, make eye contact. Sophie, look at James in the eye. Sophie, and didn't drive the kid crazy. But why is she not doing that? And you answer the question, why, and then you treat her differently. So is she afraid of James? If she's afraid of James, then what you do is you make her not afraid. And the eye contact will naturally follow. The very big thing, because I'm saying every single thing, gigantic, or as my grandkids would say, gigantus. Every single thing that child is doing, just as you as the adult make sense, or else they wouldn't do it. So you want to take a step behind the behavior. Why are they doing it? Rather than just deal with trying to stop the behavior.
How would that be different for a teenager who's done something that's, very dangerous or requires a big boundary to be set, or possibly even a punishment to be dished out?
It's the same thing. Let me do one that's even bigger. I was trying to explain this to somebody before. So the Nazis are exterminating Jews. Oh my God. So what you want to do is get the Nazi to stop exterminating the Jew. Now, you can do that in many ways, but that Nazi still wants to. And when there's an opportunity, will do so in whatever form. Why is that Nazi trying to exterminate Jew? I'm Jewish, so I'm allowed to say this, I'm told. Is because the Nazi was taught that the Jew is a rat. The Nazi believes Jews are vermin. And what do you do to vermin? You exterminate them. So what you need to do is teach that Nazi that this Jew is not vermin. And once the Nazi understands that, then everything else follows. All right. So the piece to understand here that people sometimes misunderstand, it's a very extreme example that I gave, but still, is that I'm not suggesting there aren't behaviors where we want to have some laws about and boundaries, as you put it. But still, even in the most severe cases, you're more likely to get the person to change their behavior when you understand why they did it from their perspective. The teenager is no different. So why is a teenager driving at 100 miles an hour when the speed limit is 40? Well, because he doesn't realize that he could kill somebody or kill himself. No, those are the consequences of that driving. Why is he doing it? There's some thrill involved. Why does he need that thrill? Well, his friends made him feel small and he wants to show them how brave. What's actually going on? And it's going to vary from teenager to teenager, from Sophie's 6-year-old friend to, one to the other, or to you and your wife, or to me, the elders here. Once you recognize that most of us are mindless, so that you're seeing somebody else's behavior from your perspective, and that may be very different from the other person's perspective. So take me again with being gullible. James, sadly, don't tell anybody, I was taken by 2 psychopaths. 2. Cost me a fortune. Now, so we look at my behavior. You say, Ellen, what's the matter with you? You need therapy. I go to the therapist, and the therapist says, look. And I said, I know. It's crazy that, that I said yes to these people. So I'm going to try not to do it. And I'll try, but I'm going to fail. Because going forward, when I'm living my life, I'm not being gullible. I'm being trusting. And I actually value being trusting. So if you want me to stop being gullible, you've got to get me to stop valuing being trusting, which is very different, because then if it were a marriage, for instance, and you were the one who was gullible and your wife sees, oh, it's because you're trusting, she may, respect it now rather than want you to change.
Yeah, it's so interesting what you shared there about the Nazi example too, because I remember reading about the Vietnam War, when the moment the Americans really started to lose that was when public perception of the war, it was when all of those images became broadcast on the news and people really understood that and then got curious as to what was really going on. It's a really interesting example that you use there.
Yeah, but, the important thing is whether the behavior is something trivial or extreme, that it always makes sense from the actor's perspective. And again, the importance of the extreme example is that I'm not condoning it. I'm simply explaining how to understand that behavior. And if you want to change it, you have to meet the person from the perspective from which they engaged in the first place.
I love all that. For an overwhelmed parent right in the moment where if they're not emotionally aware, where they can just snap at the parent, what should they do to be able to focus on themselves?
People need to be easier on themselves, right? You can't be brought up in a good, bad world, right, wrong world, which is all of us, no matter how liberal and mindful and aware we are. All of us have little triggers and what have you. It's how you punish yourself afterwards. And if you did this with even Sophie, but certainly with a teenager, you go back in and you say, I'm sorry, or you explain why you did what you did. And also what you did made sense given your understanding of the event. And then you laugh at it. I think that there's a more general formula here, which for me is, take what you do seriously, but don't take yourself so seriously. And no, really, none of us are going to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect parents. You're not going to be a perfect podcaster. I'm not going to be a perfect scientist. And you don't want to be. This is the funny thing. People think they want perfection, but you can either do things imperfectly mindfully or perfectly mindlessly.
So would your advice for parents be to focus on spending more time with their kids, or to simply change what they notice during the time that they have together already?
Yeah, I think that around the globe, people pay attention to the wrong things. What matters most, in my view, is the how we're doing whatever we're doing, rather than, the specific what. That if you have 10 minutes of time where the child feels that you see who they are, where they feel that you're appreciating how they are, that to me would be more valuable than 3 hours where they're annoying you and you're misunderstanding them and wishing you were elsewhere. So the how, if we're mindful, even when you're learning to store up in the child's mind all of these facts, like 1 and 1 is 2, is, to my mind, only going to hurt them as they get older.
Yeah.
So if you taught them just one fact, to appreciate the power of uncertainty, and then just let them loose, we might end up with kids who are more sensible than many of their parents.
Yeah,
Because you get, when you're talking to a child, and if they're doing it for one reason and you're yelling at them for another reason, they just say, oh, God, there he goes again. Dad, get out of here.
well, since you and I had first caught up, I've been a lot more proactive when I have the kids. Little things like when the leaves are gone from the trees, and then when they come back, we look at the beautiful little pink flowers and the bees, and we go on these little nature walks where they each have a camera. We're noticing just the tiniest things at every single house. It's one of the most beautiful experiences I've had as a parent, to get away from just the stress, especially at the end of the day when the kids are tired, my wife and I are tired. Yeah, it's nice to have that moment.
And you can do it in the house as well. I mean, you can take that leaf, or it'd be nice, buy some flowers for your wife. She's so annoying. She'll need it. And have your children every day tell you all the ways that the flowers have changed. Every hour, they can get it to the moment, whatever that moment is. See, everything is changing. And that's exciting. Or should be. It means everything is new. And when people don't realize, you go back to your anxious people and people who are so unhappy with themselves, they need to realize that in the course of a year, almost every cell of your body is brand new. Fat cells, I think, have a harder time, but most cells replenish. And so in some very literal way, you're brand new. The only thing holding you back are these mindsets.
What's the number one skill that you think parents need to teach their children?
Probably to be mindful. So how are they going to teach them to be mindful? Just to be happy with not knowing. Not knowing gives you something to pay attention to. Oh, I know what I was saying before that I didn't finish. That you can be perfectly mindless or imperfectly mindful, so that we seek perfection. And the child is seeking perfection. When you achieve that, there's no there anymore. So let's say that you are learning to play golf. If I could get a hole-in-one every time I swung the club, well, at that point, there'd be no game. We should enjoy the imperfection. That allows growth.
I'll tell my father that as well. I think he'd like that one.
He plays golf?
He does. He loves it. Yeah. So a lot of kids, they talk about this idea of life's not fair, life's not fair. We tell our kids that, yes, life's not fair. How do you think parents should approach that statement?
Well, I don't know. What is fair? Who decided what fair is?
Yeah. I guess they're talking about in terms of the siblings, when you got two of them and one gets one thing and another gets another one, or they see a classmate who gets something that they miss out on. So I think raising kids with this idea that everything is fair and equal is dangerous.
But I think you open up a philosophy book and look at all the different ways of understanding fairness. So it's equity. Everybody gets the same thing. People get what they need, which would be a different thing. Or, and both of those change over time. I remember, you get somebody in a class who got a B+, who thought they should have gotten an A. And they never pay attention to the times they got A's that perhaps should have been B+. But I think maybe the larger points, and I don't know, what difference does it make? If John got 2 and you got 1 of whatever it is, how does that change anything in life?
I can see that diffusing the situation almost instantly.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. When we face a challenge, people usually ask themselves, what if this goes wrong? But what is the physiological impact of simply asking, what if this turns out better than I imagined?
I don't think we should do either. We say, what if this turns out to be a disaster? What if this turns out to be better than I am? Just do it and do it well. And then however it turns out, there'll be advantages to it.
Yeah, I think that's great. Well said. And last question, Ellen, if we look 10 years into the future, what is the one psychological or physiological fact that we believe today that you think research will have debunked?
Well, this takes us back to the beginning where you wanted to know who out there doesn't believe mind-body unity. And I said, well, more people believe it now. So we go forward 10 years and even more people. And the reason I want people to believe that, because that gives us enormous control over both our health and our well-being. And what better outcome could we be seeking?
Yeah, you must feel that the more you dive into this stuff, the more just possibilities open it up, especially with the convergence of technology being able to help with these solutions.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting because when I was talking to you about mindful parenting or just teaching people that the world is uncertain, we should be learning things conditionally. So I continuously, at some point it'll change, but I asked Chat AI, how much is 1 + 1? And Chat, just like you, James, says 2. So there's room for all of us and all the machines we create to improve.
How does it respond when you tell it exactly what you mentioned earlier about how 1 + 1 is often not 2?
No, no, I'm not trying to teach it.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
what others have taught it.
I'm going to plug that in now. I think that's I've seen all of these different questions where it's like, I need to go 50 meters down the road to get my car washed. Should I walk or drive? And a lot of the AI models are saying you should walk. And then the response is, well, how can I wash my car if my car's at home? So yeah, it's pretty funny.
That's very good. Yeah, no, okay.
Yeah. Well, there are a bunch of ways to connect with Ellen, and we'll link to all of these in the show notes. You can follow her on Instagram at Ellen J. Langer, visit her website, ellenlanger.me, and grab a copy of her latest book and all of her upcoming books on Amazon. Again, all that and more will be linked in the show notes. Ellen, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
This was fun. Thank you for having me, James. Be well.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of the Win the Day podcast. We want to hear your thoughts on what we covered today, so drop a comment on the YouTube version of this episode with your favorite takeaway, any questions you have, or what actions you'll be taking as a result of what was shared in this episode. And if you found value in the Win the Day podcast, leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You'll find a link to both of those in the show notes. It'll only take you a few seconds, and more ratings really helps other people discover the show so they can get the mindset upgrade they need, and we can bring more winners into the Win the Day movement. That's all for this episode. Get out there and win the day. Until next time, onwards and upwards, always.